We interview around 25,000 shoppers across the world, I think 16 or 20 markets. And price is consistently identified as the most or one of the most critical factors for consumers when making a purchasing decision.
When does it actually matter? So maybe a top SKU has gone out of stock. The brand is actually adding runs for it. So that's just wasted money. Or there could be an authorized reseller who's been quietly violating MAP.
Another thing we can't skip in this conversation is definitely the layer of AI agentic commerce that's out there. And brands increasingly need AI co-pilots to translate shelf signals into immediate actions.
It's really clear not to start with the question, which AI tool should I deploy, right? But much more, which data must we trust and govern so that AI can actually do its work?
This is the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of MetricsCart. Welcome back to the Digital Shelf Insider podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different. We are moving beyond a regular conversation to understand what a strong digital shelf strategy looks like in 2026. To help us break this down, I'm joined by two experts who see this from every angle. From VML, we have Mark. He is the digital shelf domain lead, and he specializes in the organizational side, which is breaking down silos and building the strategic roadmaps that global brands need to scale. And from MetricsCart, we have Rohan, our product strategy lead, who brings in the technical perspective, focusing on the data signals and the precision tools that actually power those strategies. So let's get started. Hi all, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Mark and Rohan joining us from VML and MetricsCart. We're going to have a complete breakdown of how the digital shelf strategy is executed for global consumer brands and how they can position the digital shelf as a growth driver. Mark, Rohan, welcome to the podcast. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, great to be here, right? And really thanks for having me. It's great to be invited to this great podcast, which I actually listen regularly.
Same here. Thank you, Sreshta. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, for the
Yep,
second
excited.
time.
Yeah, excited to be here again. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's try to get an overall outlook of, what are the sort of primary problems, from the agency perspective as well as from a vendor perspective, we try to solve for brands, or to put it more clearly, what is the most common digital shelf concerns look like that you hear from brands? Mark, do you
Yeah.
want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit more background, so you know where we're coming from, because I'm part of a center of expertise within, let's say, VML, or even our mother company is called WP. And WP does a lot of things, right? Media, creative, and so on. So we serve a lot of brands.
Yeah.
But as a center of expertise, we get, let's say, invited to when a brand specifically has questions on the digital shelf. Today I think it's good to take you through a good example of a customer we just finalized a digital shelf strategy 2 months ago. And typically, let's say a brand already has a digital shelf, right? Because you're already selling products through the digital shelf. Typically, they already have some kind of metrics. They might have a PIM, they might have a digital shelf analytics tool, they might have a DAM, right? So the question for them most of the time we experience is, we are now at this level, right? And we want to go to a next level of performance. Types of questions we get is, for instance, how do I onboard a much broader stakeholder group than I currently have? Because sometimes within the brands, the digital shelf is really positioned within, for instance, e-commerce, right? But as we're probably going to explore, you need a whole village. You need supply chain, you need marketing, you need brand, you need a lot of people. So you want them to be invited into the digital shelf, work. So that's one question number one we typically get, and also for this specifically brand. The second, this brand was also looking for was business justification. So that means budgets are tight, right? They remain limited, but you still want to invest. But you want to convince, let's say, certain stakeholders that the dealership is a critical battleground, that you must win, right? But it also represents a large growth opportunity. So really quantifying, let's say, that the investment is really worth every buck. And the third is a little bit more internal, typically. So they know for instance, their technology is there, but it's fragmented, or the processes are unclear. So they have questions like, how do actually our processes look like?
Yeah.
From content creation to maybe in the end actually publishing it on the digital shelf. So there's so many things we can do. So help us prioritize and put a roadmap together so we can tackle this problem right head on. So those are the types of questions we typically get.
Right. Rohan, would you like to add on?
Sure. So, speaking strictly from the MetricsCart side, so one of the most common challenges that we hear from brands is basically platform adoption. So, and this is one that I care about a lot as a PM. So, what happens is a brand will onboard our platform, they see the potential, but then it just doesn't make it into anyone's priority list. Everyone's stretched thin. So part of my job becomes figuring out how do I make sure they're logging in when it actually matters. And, when does it actually matter? So maybe a top SKU has gone out of stock when the brand is actually adding runs for it. So that's just wasted money. Or there could be an authorized reseller who's been quietly violating map, or maybe there's some signal in reviews that can point to a problem, like an early signal that says a newly launched product has got a specific problem with some product component or an attribute. So these are the moments where the platform actually kind of pays for itself, but only if someone's paying attention to it. So this is one of the major problems that we face, and this is actually why we stay close to our clients beyond just onboarding. Even a weekly login could surface deeper patterns than sending alerts alone. And especially when it comes to when you're talking about review analysis or content compliance, those are kind of long term things. Those are more longitudinal. So we kind of work with clients to figure out what format fits into their workflow, whether maybe that's a custom dashboard, maybe that's a custom report, maybe that's like a weekly digest, or maybe we just send them a handful of metrics that they already have in their workflow, just pipe it into some view, something like that. So this is one of the major challenges. Another one that comes to the top of my mind is data access. So, and this is kind of surprising to me as well, because brands usually don't really know what they have access to. So, for example, Amazon reviews, right? We would assume that that's a given, that all brands have access to their Amazon reviews. But then most of the times we see brands reaching out to saying that they don't know whether their vendor or seller setup lets them pull those reviews. So what usually happens is they either end up reinventing the wheel, or maybe spending weeks figuring it out, or worst case, they actually buy duplicate data sets that they already had access to. So yeah, that's one of the other. So that's basically wasted time and money before any insight is generated. So yeah, I just want to highlight those two major challenges that we see brands. Yeah.
Yeah. Great points, Mark and Rohan. I mean, these are some of the real set of challenges that brands face lately. All right. Before we get back into the conversation, I just want to take a moment to talk about something that can really elevate the way you manage your e commerce channels. If you're in the consumer goods or durable space, listen up. You already know that staying ahead in the digital marketplace is crucial, whether you're a retailer, brand, or agency. But how do you get the most accurate insights in real time? How do you keep track of competitor price activity, consumer trends, and constant changes in product visibility? That's where MetricsCart comes in. MetricsCart is a marketplace intelligence platform designed specifically for e-commerce teams like yours. It gives you a holistic, data-driven view of your performance across all digital shelves. Whether it's price monitoring, competitive analysis, or understanding trends before they become a wave, MetricsCart has you covered. I've seen firsthand how this kind of intelligence takes brands from just surviving to thriving. If you're managing products in the consumer goods or durable space, it's a game changer. Check them out, and I promise you, your e commerce game won't be the same. Now, let's get back to the show. So, when there are these many broad and open questions at the beginning of a project, where and how do you start? I mean, Mark, would you like to answer this?
Yeah, and I think the answer would be very clear for me, because in the beginning, you really need to start building bridges between you and the rest of your company. And by doing that is, I think, most important is to explain the digital shelf in offline wording.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we forget, for most brands, online is important, but offline is much bigger for most brands, right? And what we also need to understand is that most senior stakeholders, they've grown up in company most of the time in the offline world, or maybe when the online world was still, let's say, relatively minor.
Right.
So I think it's very important to make the digital shelf equivalent to the physical shelf. And so that means brands, these senior stakeholders know they invest huge amounts to get their products, for instance, on eyesight, right, in a physical store, or at promotion corners, or to have clear packaging, or to always be in stock, right? So these are concepts they already know. And then it's much easier to translate to the digital shelf, because the same thing, of course, happens on the digital shelves. So you have to make them aware. Thousands or even millions of consumers, right, every day visit those product detail pages, for instance, right, and they interact with your products, with your brand, right? So, for instance, for creative colleagues in your company, you can translate that into, it's an always on campaign. Every day, millions of visitors building a brand image, right? And of course, also hopefully driving to a transaction. So I think it's super important to start with making that comparison, and then you can go to underlining the differences. Because this shelf is, of course, also very different. Because the physical shelf, to take an example, you've got planograms. That is the way how you organize physical shops. They change maybe 1 or 2 times a year, right? Because it's just a lot of work. But actually, the biggest retailers on marketplace, you already mentioned Amazon and Walmart, Rohan, is they change that maybe 200, 300 times a year, right? So it's that becomes super complex, right? And so winning on the shelf is actually not that easy. So we want to give a wholehearted cheers or boost to your listeners that if you're facing these kind of struggles, be aware that you're not alone. You're definitely not alone.
So I like what Mark just shared about the fact that, many of the brand team members, they come from the traditional, they worked in traditional retail places, and then they switch to the online format. So there's a lot of metrics to learn, to figure out. And like Mark mentioned that, things change so quickly on the digital shelf, which also means the marketplace updates that roll out very, very frequently. What are the points that you would like to add on, Rohan?
I think the bridge building framing is spot on. You know, again, in our workflow, so before we show anyone a dashboard, we try to understand what their workflow is. So who's going to be using the dashboard? What sort of decision are they going to make with it? The reason this matters is because we work with a genuinely wide range of users, right? So we've got data scientists, they want API access, they want raw exports. On the other hand, we might have marketplace managers, brand managers, or e-commerce experts. They just want to know what's going wrong with my product. Is my content compliant on these top 50 SKUs on certain retailers? And these are very different conversations, and you have to show up with different pitches to both of these places. And yeah, and there's an entirely completely different layer in between, and those are agencies. So agencies use our platform not just for their own analysis,
Right.
but as something that they can bring to their clients as part of a broader strategy. So that's a completely different dynamic. So the first step for us is also, learn their language, try to understand what problem is on fire for them, and then kind of anchor the platform to that. Again, relevance is very important here. So uh, a reference from an apparel brand might be completely relevant to an appliance brand. So relevance is everything when you're trying to earn a spot, earn a place in someone's workflow.
Yeah. I guess there's no one size fits all formula at all in this scenario. Mark, I have a couple of questions for you from a strategic viewpoint. Uh, Agencies like VML require digital shelf analytics partners to work with accurate data and to sort of evaluate a brand's baseline performance. So, what are the specific criteria that you look for when selecting a vendor partner?
So I think we look when we do a strategy project, we look, let's say, at all factors a digital shelf analytics tool like MetricsCart provides. So and they might not be a surprise to you, but to give you, let's say, a proper list is, first of all, are the images, right, or the assets. We see that shoppers, the first thing they do, uh, typically when they are looking at the PDP, they're looking at the images, they're looking at the video, right? But they're next, they're typically also looking at the copy and about the detailed product, let's say, specifications, right? And we see also a lot of shoppers actually abandon purchases when that information is actually insufficient.
Yeah.
But we also take a look, for instance, at search, at reviews, availability, price, right? So these are, let's say, the common KPIs, let's say so.
Yeah.
And for instance, the brands that we were analyzing also were already tracking these metrics. What we typically add to this is actually two major things.
Yeah.
One of them is, again, a little bit more that internal KPI.
Yeah.
And that could be, for instance, an OTIF KPI. So that's on time in full. That's a KPI actually borrowed from supply chain.
Right.
And that means if you have your content ready when your product is actually launched, right? Because if your content is not ready, you can't launch, and you miss out actually on sales. So that's easy to quantify also. What is the actual value, right? If you have your process basically in order. And the second thing we add is a KPI called ROPO. So that's research online, purchased offline.
Okay. Yeah.
And that is because nowadays shoppers like you, me, probably, we go to a shop, but then we start actually using our mobile phone to look up brand information, product information, right?
Yeah.
So that means you are making an impact on physical sales, right?
Yeah.
With the digital shelf. So we always advise to take account the impact you have on physical sales, even though that sometimes can be hard to quantify, right? So very much be conservative. But we do that for very, very two specific reasons. One of them is, of course, you're missing out on benefits, right? So your business case is only half of what it could be.
Yeah.
But second, it's also much closer to the truth because this is the way shoppers actually shop nowadays, right? And it also helps you, again, building those bridges because you're going to need those internal stakeholders that might not be in e-commerce, but might be in supply chain or might be somewhere else, right? To bring them onto your journey.
Right. Another thing we also notice is that execution now requires a massive volume of variables, involves a massive volume of variables such as the search rankings, content quality, the ones that you mentioned, there's media bids and there's retailer algorithm, competitor insights, so much to look into. So amidst all of this noise, what do you think are the primary conversion KPIs that brands need to prioritize or you prioritize in your process?
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually Rohan already said it. It really depends on your baseline.
Yeah.
So that means for the brand we just created a digital shelf strategy, their reviews and ratings in this case were already in good shape. So it doesn't make that much sense to invest more on that particular topic.
Yeah.
But this is exactly why you need digital shelf analytics tool in place
Yeah.
as an agency, but also as a brand,
Yeah.
because then you can customize your strategy to focus exactly where you want to create value. So I think I would always advise when you start a project like this, or you want to start creating a roadmap, measure where you are right now, right?
Yeah.
Because then you know where your biggest gaps are.
Makes so much of sense. Now, MetricsCart focuses heavily on map violations, price monitoring, and consumer insights that kind of drive the product development and help with supply chain decisions. So, where do these specific metrics sit within the broader execution strategy?
Yeah, VML actually has its own yearly future shopper report, we call it.
Yeah.
It's where we interview around 25,000 shoppers across the world. I think 16 or 20 markets.
Yeah.
And price is consistently identified as the most or one of the most critical factors for consumers when making a purchasing decision, right? And the research for this year has not been done, but I'm expecting the importance of price to be amplified by the current global economic shifts, inflation, oil prices, right? So I think it only gets more important. And the example I'm going to take is also the brand we just analyzed, which also had quite a lot of price violations by unauthorized sellers, by authorized sellers, by price wars between retailers and marketplaces, for instance. So it was actually quite a big chunk of the business case that we created. And not only, let's say, quantified benefits, but also brand perception, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important to understand that when your prices are low, also your brand perception is dragged down along with it, unfortunately. So when we look at price, I think it's super important, but it's also very difficult to actually improve price because of these complexities. So overall, I would say it's super important to brands and to shoppers, but we temper a little bit the expectations around price. But what we do is put price in, let's say, in that holistic framework, right? Because also according to that same future shopper report, for instance, over 70% of the shoppers say high quality images and product videos are super important or essential for a purchase decision. Or 63% of the shoppers really want more detailed product information. And we're expecting that number to go up with agentic commerce.
Yeah.
Right? But the same holds again for reviews, for delivery speed, easy returns, and so on. So again, I'm repeating myself, but you need to build bridges, and focusing on a single KPI does actually the opposite. And typically solutions also improve multiple KPIs. So for instance, if you improve copy, you also improve your discoverability in your search, you improve conversion, and you improve your sales, right? So it's very important to understand the interconnectivity between the metrics.
For sure. Let's try to understand a little bit about what does building the brands for the future or tomorrow means. Now, how can brands really seize the opportunity and make strategy actionable and work for them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well, the question is actually, well, great story, Mark, but how are we actually going to achieve this, right?
Yeah.
And usually what I say, or what also VML says, is actually great, but we think actually you can do it as a brand. So our way of working is not to give them, let's say, that fish, right?
Yeah.
AKA updated PDPs. We're not updating PDPs, but we're actually teaching them how to fish. And this is typically where we step in, right? So it's not about tweaking, let's say, those few product descriptions, for instance,
Yeah.
but it's really about fundamentally reshaping how the brand operates and wins online. So we do build a business case showing the potential, right? We do break down that potential in different buckets. So
Right.
improving content quality, improving search, improving competitive pricing, right? Or guaranteeing much more product availability. So all those are buckets of value. But the way to achieve that day in, day out on the shelf is not fixing, let's say, the gap, but building capabilities. I can mention a couple of them. The first one is data analytics. So this is also where digital shelf analytics would fit in, right? So you really have that established, unified, actionable KPIs.
Yeah.
You would really need, let's say, an econ strategy and supply chain. So creating that single source of truth, but also being able to efficiently distribute that
Yeah.
to all the retailers. You've got, let's say, the governance and operating model. So there's much more who does what, clear roles, responsibility, and also decision-making structures. And finally, of course, technology. So
Yeah.
you have all these technologies all around, but they need to be connected in a scalable way. And with these capabilities, this is our framework. If you invest in them, then you are able to excel day in, day out. Also, when a new product comes up.
Right. Rohan, do you want to add in?
No, I agree 100%. And like Mark said, if VML is teaching you how to fish, then obviously you need a fishing rod, and that's kind of where these digital shelf, platforms come in. And in this particular analogy, we're the fishing rod, and uh, we could say that we're a high tech one of that. Maybe if imagine one with like cameras or sonar, which can actually help you identify, give you exact location of the fish, what they're biting on, if they've actually hooked, if they've actually had your treat or whatever. So I just wanted to extend that analogy, and I think, yeah, in this particular thing, we would be the fishing rod.
Right. Another question I had in this line is, suppose how do you really convince brands that this is actionable, um, uh, the whole strategy that we are working with? How do we make it seem practical in their minds?
Yeah. Yeah, because a roadmap, right, that doesn't sound actionable. That sounds like a fancy slide, right, for instance. So I think this podcast doesn't allow for, let's say, every single detail, but for instance, in this project, we really went deep. So that means we mapped their entire product launch process, putting people from different departments who sometimes even never met before, putting them in the same room or in the same digital room most of the time, right, and fostering those connections between their teams, right, that never talked before, and building that connected brand. And to give you more concrete examples, I think in this project we do that in 6 or 8 weeks. We talk to more than 100 people. We hold interviews, we have workshops, and that actually results in the end in over 100 tangible, ready to execute projects, right? So that those projects have timelines, they have people, they have deliverables, right? Really to get ready for that transformative solution on the digital shelf. So it's as easy as to say, yes, let's do it. And they actually have already the execution plan with it.
Right. Another thing we can't skip in this conversation is definitely the layer of AI agentic commerce that's out there. And brands increasingly need AI and co-pilots to translate shelf signals into immediate actions. That could be identifying the urgent content fixes or billing adjustments or finding out inventory gaps. So, how do you view the shift from reactive reporting to predictive and prescriptive execution?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. There's a massive amount of volume in data, right?
Yeah.
And brands typically don't have the capacity to analyze or to execute. And by the way, agencies also, right? So it's actually the human effort is just quite a lot. So what we see in the market is that these digital shelf analytics tools like MetricsCart, they are selling them short in the past by just providing an analytics solution, right? Because I think you've got the potential to go indeed straight to actually the recommended action. So these agents, they are not only analyzing data, but they're also indicating, right, the next best action. And that next best action could be for a human, but could also be for another agent. So actually, we're moving from towards a agent to agent conversation. I just to give you a concrete example. Let's say a do-shelf analytics tool analyzes a particular SKU, right?
Yeah.
And it comes up with on retailer X, the title misses a brand, and maybe the tone of voice in the product description is not according to brand guidelines. So that the shelf agent gives a briefing to another agent, the creative agent.
Yeah.
That creative agent creates the new title and the new description, and it sends it to the next agent, to the workflow in the PIM that saves the data in the source of truth, and then actually sends it out after approval, right, human approval, and then updates that product title and description online again. So we've got a full circle, all supported by agents, and each part is actually connected. Yeah, you get the feel of the scale and automation of where we're heading at.
I think I completely agree with the fact that all I think digital shelf platforms, they're selling themselves short of AI capabilities. We're only scratching the surface. And honestly speaking, we're in that transition ourselves right now. As a product team, we're completely aware that we've been operating closer to the reporting end of the spectrum rather than the action end, and that's something that we're actively working to change. So there are a lot of features in our pipeline that is focused exactly on this, like AI co-pilots, predictive insights, predictive signals, prescriptive recommendations, that sort of thing. And I just want to share something. So what shaped our thinking here was actually a really honest conversation that we had with a client very early on. So when conversational AI was had just started going mainstream, there was genuine skepticism on, can we trust what it tells us, so this client said something like, if it's AI, I never take it at face value. I'll treat it as a highly informed second opinion. And that kind of reframed everything for us. And we kind of understood that the goal wasn't to replace the decision maker, it's to make sure that they're walking into every situation better informed than they would have been otherwise. So when we think about AI features now, we're designing for that sort of uh, trust dynamic, surfacing the reasoning, showing the data behind the recommendation, giving enough context so that the user can act confidently, and we're not just telling them what to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you the same thing of where does trust fit into this equation? You just answered it that, the decision making can't be left to AI at this point, at least, where people do deal with a little bit of skepticism.
Yeah, it's a second
So,
opinion. Yeah.
yeah. We've almost come to the end of this show, and I have one last question for both of you. So, with brand presence expanding across pure play marketplaces, social commerce, D2C, and now agentic commerce, how should brands really approach AI in strategy and planning?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm going to. I like this the trust discussion, Rowan, and Jersey you just had, because I think in most discussions brands have nowadays on AI, the model or the agent, right, gets the attention. But let's say the underlying, especially master data problem, typically gets ignored. AI becomes more trustworthy or less trustworthy, right? Because the underlying, whether that's asset data, inventory data, product data, if that is inconsistent or poorly governed or not owned, right, the result is also not so great. And thus AI, the result, the outcome, the recommendation is also not so trusted as Rohan mentioned. So we always recommend putting the fundamentals in place first, right? So it's garbage in, garbage out. That was already the case, but now it's amplified with with AI. That means actually sometimes doing the unsexy work, right? So that's putting the single source of truth in place, data governance in place, processes connected. So really the hard groundwork. Because I think for decision makers who might be listening, or you might be able to influence a decision maker, it's really clear not to start with the question, which AI tool should I deploy, right? But much more, which data must we trust and govern so that AI can actually do its work, right? And act reliably so we can trust it.
Yeah, I think the fundamentals point cannot be overstated, and we see this play out specifically in terms of the inputs that customers upload to our platform. So when the data coming in is fragmented or inconsistent, the outputs become unreliable. So what usually gets reported as a platform accuracy problem is more often than not, it almost always traces back to this. It's an input problem. It's the fundamentals not being right. And honestly, this is one of the major challenges that we have, that we face internally while building these AI powered features. So if the input data isn't entirely in our control. We're pulling that from retailer ecosystems, we're pulling that from third party systems, we're pulling that from brand supplied content. So the quality and consistency of that varies. So a big part of what we're trying to do is building enough resilience into the system to handle that variability. So AI is only good as the data you feed it. And as Mark was saying, if you feed proper data into it, just amplifies it. It's no longer the other way around, it just amplifies it. So yeah, you need to have your fundamentals in place. That's very important.
All right, Mark. So we've come to the end of the episode. Do you want to sum up what listeners can sort of key takeaways that listeners can take away from this episode?
Yeah, sure. And especially, I think if you want to start a digital strategy project yourself, and you're recognizing all these pain points, and all the potential solutions we just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think number one is always to keep the eyes on the price. And what I mean with that is link everything to business and financial results, because everything should be translated to a line on the P&L sheet, right? Whether it's increasing sales or decreasing costs, because that's the language everybody talks in every brand. Number two is that capability thinking, right? So learn how to fish, learn how to sustain digital shelf excellence in the long term, and not only a quick PDP fix, for instance.
Yeah.
The third thing, make it actionable, right? In the example I mentioned, we created 100 individual projects. They are actually already executing right now.
Yeah.
And number four is collaboration. And again, putting people sometimes for the first time in the same room together, de-silo the organization.
Yeah.
Because I believe, and VML also believes, it's that connected brands that drive growth.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark and Rohan, for joining me on this a wonderful, insightful session. I'm sure it's going to be very useful for our listeners also. We've covered so much, from what are the most discussed digital challenges to the KPIs to prioritize to agentic commerce and a lot more in between. So everyone listening in, I hope you had a wonderful session. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to be here.